Dobry wieczór. Nazywam się Marta Rawuszko, jestem socjolożką z wykształcenia. Pracuję w Funduszu Feministycznym, który jest organizacją wspierającą finansowo aktywizm kobiet, osób niebinarnych, osób transpłciowych w Polsce w formie organizacji pozarządowych czy grup nieformalnych i pracuję też na Uniwersytecie Warszawskim.
Thank you very much. And next we have Małgorzata Tarasiewicz.
Dobry wieczór. Ja jestem obecnie działaczką ruchu mińskiego, właśnie mieszkańcy dla Sopotu, ale myślę, że do tego panelu jestem zaproszona ze względu na moją bogatą przeszłość, to znaczy działalność w ruchu Wolność i Pokój, opozycyjnym wobec komunizmu w latach 80., a następnie moją działalność feministyczną w organizacji Network of East-West Women.
And the last but not least is Maria Mrwowa. You can say a few words about yourself.
Na parę słów. Dobry wieczór.
Good evening. My name is Maria
Nazywam się Maria Mrwowa.
I am working at Gender Studies Prague as an oral historian.
Gender Studies w Pradze jako historyk przekazu ustnego przy projekcie na temat historii i edukacji. Jak zachowała się Czechosłowacja we wspomnieniach kobiet? Jestem także członkiem rozmaitych kolektywów aktywistów w Pradze.
Thank you very much. The reason for putting this panel together is that women have played and play even also today a crucial and important role that is quite often omitted or neglected or forgotten afterwards. And this applies to the upheavals of 1980s, especially 1989, but also in 1980, for instance, in Poland, also during 1990s and today. And one of the key questions that we wanted to ask is that many of these women remain to be active politically, but the significance of this activism and the significance of their work sometimes is neglected or ignored in the mainstream. And so that's why the idea of this workshop that was organized by Owen, a foundation from Berlin, from Germany, in partnership with Institute of Sociology of Jagiellonian University from Krakow, and also in partnership with the Social Archive of Women's Protests in Poland, was to bring together experiences of the activism, to see what lessons were learned and what lessons could have been learned. In other words, what can contemporary activists take from previous generations of activism, and what previous activists from previous generations can learn from contemporary activism, especially women's activism or feminist activism. Because sometimes there's an issue of or question of fragmentation or lack of transfer of knowledge and experiences, and one of the main questions that also was asked today and was discussed today during this workshop, but it's such a big question that we can probably discuss it for quite a long time, is what kind of experiences contemporary activists have learned and should learn from the past. And I don't want to do some name calling to ask, but let me start from you, because and we will follow that order. Because also there are very different contexts, historical contexts of women's activism, especially in the 80s. So my first question would be, what was the main lesson from the wave of women's activism and engagement in the 1980s that is still visible today?
I cannot speak on behalf of anybody except for myself, I guess. And for me, one of the biggest lessons is this courage to imagine a completely new world. And speaking from this peace activist point of view, I'm thinking of the way to rethink, reshape the concept of security, the concept of defense, of our perception of non-violent ways of communication. because I see nonviolence as a most sustainable approach in protests and in all kind of acting. And sometimes it seems like in a mainstream discourse, nonviolent equals weak and is not perceived as serious. The protests, when they are completely nonviolent, the way we see it, for example, in Belarus now, are not seen as a threat to the system. And this is, for me, something that I would like to take from the activism, from previous activism, how brave and courageous the women were thinking of this world without the army, without this delegating violence to the government, which would be very important for me in the future as well. Also speaking about the war, but not only any kind of violent conflict, basically.
No, ja jestem pod wrażeniem dzisiejszych rozmów i doświadczenia kobiet zaangażowanych właśnie w aktywizm polityczny, w walkę polityczną w latach 80. czy później wcześniej. I to, co wydaje mi się, że jest dla mnie niezwykle imponujące było w tych wypowiedziach i doświadczeniu, to było, że mimo braku wiary, że to może się udać, jednak osoby podejmowały działania. I to jest też coś, co biorę dla siebie, to znaczy, że jest jakaś siła wyobraźni, albo nawet wyobraźni, za którą nie idzie 100% pewność, że się zwycięży, że coś się zmieni, ale że trzeba podjąć tą próbę, aby ten świat jakoś na nowo wymyślić, żeby go po prostu zmienić. I nie rozpatrując tego, jakie są szanse powodzenia, podejmuje się działanie z innymi osobami, które myślą podobnie. To jest w jakimś sensie taka siła wyobraźni,
this is about the power of imagination, the power that things can actually look differently. So you simply meet and act. You meet in acting. This is something that impresses me and that I believe is still very much up to date, very much contemporary, very much very needed. Namely, you need to know that what is now can be changed, that the oppression that we come across today, that violence that we witness, that the oppressive action of power, of authorities towards certain groups like women is not something to stay here for good, and we are the ones who can put an end to it, acting commonly. So this is a huge power of solidarity, but also it is solidarity in its pure form. In other words, for me, when I learned about the story of different strikes, what was especially powerful was this mutual help, social help, supporting the families of those who were arrested and subject to repressions. It was sharing whatever could be shared in a very practical way. For example, sharing money, sharing shelter, instead of offering somebody a place in one's flat. And this is something that might appear to be something very remote, some need that is about our history, our social history, more than about the present day. But I think that sometimes it's very simple, straightforward, practical help, like offering somebody shelter, offering somebody money, is something that can still save lives and push the world ahead. This is something that I find to be very important. And referring to the first thing I mentioned, talking about using this practical knowledge that we have today, we should also change our thinking about power. What is generally accepted is that whoever sits in the panel stays there forever. So you have to look at us for 2 hours. But I was invited here, but I'm ready to invite another person to sit here instead. So if anybody would like to take the floor, I'm eager to offer you the same seat and just take a seat.
And yes, this is actually one of the ideas we had in mind, to not to have a fixed panel audience situation. I wanted to open the floor for discussion a little bit later, but I'm happy that this idea is not only mine. So I would like to ask the same question, Małgorzata Tarasiewicz.
Samo pytanie chciałbym postawić teraz Małgorzacie Tarasiewicz. I'm very happy that our guest from Ukraine mentioned Belarus, because I also wanted to tell you about it, as I'm observing what is going on in Belarus now, observing this enormous activity on the part of women. I also meet women from Belarus. I saw one of them who has just returned from Brest, and she told me that women there feel marginalized. In spite of the fact that it is shown that there is this chain of women, you have the woman heading the wave of changes, that the changes are initiated by women, and then internally within this oppositionist movement, or when they try to get access to the mass media, to publications, they feel that they are treated as a certain ornament. Well, obviously it's nice to have them there. It's good that they offer their faces and they create this image of this protest, and maybe it is owing to that the protest is not fought against violently, but they do not feel really empowered. Now, discussing today what happened back in the 80s when we were in the opposition, I have this sense of déjà vu. Perhaps we need to give a certain hint to the women in Belarus and tell them that they should already be perceiving it all differently. They should be striving to see what can happen a few steps ahead, because it might turn out, well, we don't know how the things go there. But if there is a certain agreement around table, then perhaps our ladies, as we were called by Lech Wałęsa, will not be so exposed anymore and so needed anymore, but they will be let go back to their stuff, that is children, home, cooking, and so on, and the gentlemen will be the ones to deal with politics, and they will take over all the seats, powerful seats in the state.
And I ask Marie,
Marie, poprosimy o odpowiedź. Sądzę, że poprzednie pokolenie feministek w danej Czechosłowacji położyły podwaliny, na podstawie których możemy budować, i znów, ucząc się od nich, odpowiedzieć sobie na pytanie, w jaki sposób my powinniśmy prowadzić naszą walkę. Więc myślę, że w latach 80. wymagało to ogromnej odwagi, jak już tutaj zostało wspomniane, by znaleźć się na ulicy, by potajemnie spotkać się w mieszkaniu, ponieważ konsekwencje spotkań publicznych były dosyć poważne. Więc chodziło o to, by się spotkać, by pisać, by zapoczątkować jakieś pisarstwo, by w ważne słowa ująć założenia, tak żebyśmy późniejsze pokolenie mogło się z tego uczyć, dowiadywać, że jest to poczucie ciągłości i coraz bardziej powinno się pracować nad tym poczuciem, nie pozwalać się zapomnieć o doświadczeniach poprzednich pokoleń, które były bardzo podobne, więc to jest wyzwaniem nawet dla nas dziś, bo pewne rzeczy nie zostały zmienione i wciąż są aktualne.
Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo.
I would like to expand slightly this question, because when comparing experiences of 1980s, especially 1989 and contemporary, what I think was characteristic for 1989 was the attempt to introduce a major change. That's why now it is called systemic transformation, and to change completely relations of power and the whole power structure, to introduce a new political system. But I have the feeling that, well, there are two questions connected with that, and I would like to start with the one that, do you have the impression that contemporary feminist activism also faces this challenge, that there is a need for a very deep change, both in the power relations and power structures, but also within the society, and or referring to what Marie has said,
Odnosząc się do tego, co
that
powiedziała
these are
Marii,
the same
może mamy
issues
do czynienia
raised
z
over
tymi
and over,
samymi
but in a different
problemami,
context.
które pojawiają się
I know it's not an easy question,
ponownie,
but
tylko w innym kontekście. Może nie jest to łatwe
I'm
pytanie,
really
ale
curious about your
jestem ciekaw,
reflections on that.
co Pani o tym sądzą.
Yeah, regarding the first question about the need
Odnośnie
of
do
a
pierwszego
bigger
pytania o
change,
potrzebę wprowadzenia
I
większych
think
zmian,
yes, this is absolutely true now,
tak, myślę, że to
as
jest
it was
absolutnie
20 years
prawdziwe
ago, as
teraz,
it was
tak
100 years
samo
ago.
prawdziwe, jak to
There
było
is
przed
this deep
20
change,
laty,
but
przed
today
100
there was
laty.
a lot of talk of a
Istnieje
vision.
potrzeba
And I
poważnych
was
zmian.
sitting
Dziś
there the
mówiliśmy
whole first
długo
session
o,
thinking, oh, I have a
o
vision, what is my
wizji
vision, what is
i
like,
zastanawiałam
what
się
the
sama, czy
future
ja mam
I
wizję, jaka jest
imagine
moja
looks
wizja
like, because
przyszłości,
I
jak
don't
powinnam
know,
wyobrazić
because I
sobie
only
przyszłość.
know
No
the
nie wiem,
life
przecież
around me and
nie
I
wiem
only
dość o
know
życiu
what I
wokół
learned
mnie,
and I learned
co
some
ciągle
parts,
się
but
uczę i
not a
wiem,
lot,
że
and I know that
dowiedziałam się o
history has
pewnych
been reviewed
częściach.
so many times
Wiem, że
that
historię
there are
przepisywano
so many
tyle
truths
razy, że
and
jest tak
I
wiele prawd
spend a lot of
i
time
spędzam sporo
deciding
czasu
what kind of
decydując,
truth
które
I
z tych
believe in.
prawd ja
But
sama powinnam
at the same time,
wyznawać, ale jednocześnie
I feel like
czuję,
now also hearing the inspiring stories of the activists from the past, I think we have the power to imagine this new world. It's just that I don't know how it looks like. The world outside of patriarchy, the world with this new power structure. Yeah, is my kind of fear is that we only create dystopian worlds instead of utopian, but I still have hope.
mam nadzieję wciąż.
Jeszcze odpowiem na to pytanie,
I will
zanim właśnie tutaj zwolnię to miejsce, dlatego
before I offer somebody else my seat on the panel.
Trudno mi jest
It
porównywać.
is hard for me to compare those periods. I did not live consciously back there, so if I were to answer whether the challenges stay the same, well, I understand that now we don't know how much time is left. I'm talking about the ecological threat that we cannot be sure whether the species we represent shall survive. And I don't think it is only about the system of political power and of its execution, but I understand that there are very urgent challenges concerning the environmental, ecological, climatic crisis. But I think that now we are simply dealing with numerous crises that I believe need just a merged response because they are interconnected. We already know it. It is not just a matter of power that is unjust or that limits our freedom or that leads to further injustice and that is detrimental to our mental health that wants to control our bodies. But we also deal with the authorities that exploit the planet. And this factor that I see as something new and that is a context changer. Now I'm going to offer this seat to somebody else. Maybe they would like to sit here instead. For me, those two periods of time, or those two stages in the development of our history are not comparable. So the period of totalitarianism, when we fought against the authorities that limited our fundamental rights, which means that we were not even free to read the books that we wanted to read, or we were not allowed to travel or say what we wanted to say. When we did, we were subject to oppression. It is hard to compare it to the situation today, when the fundamental liberties are accessible to us. That is why sometimes it is a journalist abuse to say that Poland is another Belarus, because it is actually an abuse in the context of what is going on in Belarus now and what used to happen in Poland in the communist times. So I think that comparing one period to another is not justified. But still, I believe that we should now strive for a change, but not only in the Polish context, but also in a broader perspective. What we need is an international change owing to the ecological threat to the entire planet. We are in a situation that, as we can see, following the forecasts, anyhow, what is going to increase is migration owing to the periods of drought. So these changes, the changes in the precipitation in the planet, are the example of the changes that we should really pay a closer look to, and that takes solidarity, and this is the priority of our activities.
If I can. Oh, you don't have a micro.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is definitely
Tak, zdecydowanie istnieje potrzeba głębszych zmian systemowych. Z pewnością istnieje potrzeba, by pojawiło się więcej kobiet i zróżnicowanych grup w systemie podejmowania wiedzy, i to w świecie polityki i nauki czy kultury. Różnorodnej grupy osób w pozycjach, które decydują o kształcie nowym. Potrzebna jest ta transformacja, potrzebna jest solidarność międzynarodowa. Dziś wszystkie kwestie, które tutaj zostały poruszone, czy to ekologiczne, czy dotyczące środowisk LGBT, czy ochrony praw kobiet, czy zdrowia kobiet, są wzajemnie powiązane na świecie i myślę, że powinniśmy współpracować pomiędzy krajami, państwami globalnie.
If I could ask you for a follow-up because already a couple of times in this discussion solidarity was mentioned, and it also already marked that there's this issue of climate change and environmental change, and that would be one of the areas in which solidarity could take place. But what would you see as a common ground for this new solidarity that is necessary for achieving any sort of change, either political or social change?
Myślę, że są takie kwestie, które dotyczą życia każdego z nas. Teraz lub wkrótce. Myślę to o kryzysie klimatycznym i pewnych wyzwaniach, przed którymi stoją ludzie. Myślę, że są problemy społeczne, pewne zagadnienia społeczne, czy te dotyczące kobiet, które dotyczą osób ze środowiska LGBT, które są brutalnie atakowane. Ale są takie kwestie, które dotyczą codziennego życia ludzi. I to jest coś, nad czym trzeba pracować. Tutaj zmiany są absolutnie niezbędne, by wspólnie pomyśleć nad tym, co można zrobić z tą sytuacją. Być może w tej drodze uda się wypracować jakieś rozwiązania podjęte przez różne kolektywy, różne regiony, być może wspólnie. It seems to me that women have shown in a way that this cooperation and solidarity is possible internationally. There are many organizations that are active, and jumping at this opportunity, we should thank the organizers of our meeting today, because we do not learn from one another in this Polish dimension only. And here, what I'm lacking in is this knowledge on what is happening in the female movements and how the women's movements can actually learn from our experience. It is only today that, and it's only owing to this meeting that such an exchange have been made possible, that we could have reflected on our mutual
ważne,
exchange of experiences, and it is absolutely crucial for us to operate in this dimension that has been mentioned here. So act internationally in order to build a coalition towards change, and that would be pointless to do that in a single country when we have the European Union, when we have the social media, and when we actually do operate globally. So I believe these exchanges like the one we are experiencing today, are absolutely necessary for us to learn from one another. And the solidarity that you have mentioned can involve this kind of support, mutual support. I will go back to supporting women, for example, in Belarus now. Similarly, we can be supported by organizations or individuals from other countries that are perhaps more experienced than we are.
Yeah, I was thinking about the common ground this whole time. Is this dissatisfaction with the world a common ground, or is the awareness that something is on a common ground? I was not really sure, but I was thinking it is already there, and the international solidarity is already there, and the tools are there. We can, like we know when something happens immediately. It's in our pockets. We know how exactly how the world is collapsing every second, and we have possibility to unite also immediately through social networks, and there have been a lot of research about the role of social
mediów
networks
społecznościowych, czy innych, nawet badania są prowadzone na temat roli protestów inicjowanych za pośrednictwem mediów społecznościowych.
Starting with 2016 in almost every country, like thousands of people in the streets, or Black Lives Matter, where almost in every country there was a big march. And I was thinking, how is it possible that we have this amazing thing, how it seems when you look at the protests that everybody understands everybody's issues and is so willing to cooperate, and still I don't understand what the next step is. And for me, I guess the next step is always local. And you go to the protest, but then you go to your local community and you are active there.
Ale potem przekładamy to na działanie naszej lokalnej społeczności.
That is the ground for solidarity as well with the local community, right? Because already you mentioned Black Lives Matter and LGBT community and their struggles. Are there any other areas where you see that there is a possibility or an opening for the feminist movement for expanding this solidarity? Because this will lead to a question of potential or natural allies of the feminist movement, if they are, of course, necessary, because this is also an open question. Does the feminist or women's movement needs allies from other trains of social movements or from other mobilizations?
I think it's very hard for me to divide different movements because of the intersectionality, because you can be a woman, you can be a black woman, you can be a black lesbian woman. We live in exile, like there's, and in every single life there will be particular experiences. So you can be an ally to yourself in this sense. And I was thinking about the role of peace activism and the movement against police brutality, where I saw completely the sense of, oh, this is exactly what I was thinking about this whole time, how brutality is a part of our life, and we have, like, the government has the right to execute violence against peaceful people in the streets, but also through army, through this special departments of police, and this is also the ally, the movement against police brutality, whatever the cause is it a racial thing, an ethnical thing, or the protests against the government in Belarus.
Thank you, and we have a new panelist, so if you want to take answer to that question, we'd be glad if you could introduce first yourself.
przedstawienie się. Good evening,
Nazywam się
ladies and
Joanna
gentlemen.
Baryłkowska.
Joanna Baryłkowska.
Przyjechałam tutaj z Berlina razem właśnie z organizatorkami, z organizacją OWEN, której jestem właśnie członkinią od wielu lat. Pracuję w Fundacji Heinricha Bölla w Berlinie, czyli w dziale zajmującym się polityką genderową i LGBT.
Devoting its activities to gender policy and LGBT. I originally from
Usiadłam
Poznań,
tutaj właśnie, żeby zająć głos w sprawie. Potrzebuję pomocy, jak to jest po polsku.
Sojusznicy.
Właśnie w sprawie sojuszników czy sojuszniczek ruchu kobiecego. W czasie dzisiejszych dyskusji już właśnie też była o tym mowa i to chciałam pogłębić, że właśnie w ruchach ekologicznych, tudzież w ruchach zajmujących się alternatywami do systemu kapitalistycznego jest właśnie bardzo dużo sojuszników i sojuszniczek ruchów feministycznych i jest bardzo dużo powiązań między tymi ruchami. W zasadzie na całym świecie, bardzo dużo też na półkuli południowej. Dlaczego? Co jest z tym, co łączy te ruchy? Poczucie troski o właśnie o innych. Tutaj myślę w ruchu feministycznym głównie o cały ruch związany z pracą opiekuńczą o care, czyli troska o drugiego człowieka, a z drugiej strony właśnie w ruchach ekologicznych troska o przyrodę, o nasz świat, o to, żeby zachować ten świat dla następnych pokoleń. I jest to właśnie powiązanie tego idei, sprzeciwienie się ekstraktywizmowi. Z jednej strony wykorzystanie człowieka, a z drugiej strony właśnie wykorzystanie zasobów naturalnych i niedbanie o to, żeby zostały one dla następnych pokoleń. Tak samo jest właśnie w ruchach, na przykład Commons czy Degrowth, które właśnie też mówią o tym, że potrzebna nam jest inna ekonomia, że to jest w centrum tej ekonomii mają być potrzeby człowieka, nie profit. I tutaj też są ogromne powiązania z ruchem feministycznym, to bardzo właśnie duże wpływy feministycznych ekonomek, które właśnie mówiły, że care work, praca opiekuńcza nie jest jakimś dodatkiem, ona jest w centrum ekonomii. Gdyby tego nie było, gdyby nie było pracy na właśnie opieki nad dziećmi, nad starszymi, to cały system ekonomiczny by się zawalił. Dlatego jest bardzo dużo właśnie powiązań między tymi organizacjami, nie organizacjami, tylko ruchami i widzę właśnie tam dużą szansę, żeby się wspierać i współpracować.
Thank you very much.
Na początku się przedstawiłam też jako działaczka.
Introducing myself, I said that I was also an activist of a local movement, of a city movement, and I think that such a local activity for the local community is, as I have been observing, very much interconnected with feminism, with acting for women's rights. I came to work with this local movement, analyzing the city budget gender-wise. For example, we carried out an analysis of the budget of the city of Gdańsk, and what was noticed there was certain irregularities concerning women, that the projects concerning women were, for example, underfinanced, and so on and so forth. So that was something that sparked my interest in studying local budgets. In what way priorities or programs declared by political parties, by politicians, are transferred later on onto the expenses? Because actually this is the easiest way of verifying political reliability of a political activist or a politician. when they decide about expenditure in a given location, do those expenditures reflect what they said about their priorities? For example, if a politician says that for him or her, what is most important is that Poland's ratification of the Istanbul Convention should not be withdrawn, we can later on see what the votes are of this politician in the local context. So, for example, whether in his city there are expenditures foreseen to fight inequalities. For example, we can see how much is allocated to fighting violence against women, how much is spent to support single mothers, and how much money at the same time is spent to organize a car race or, I don't know, some promotion of sporting events. So when you analyze that, you'll see that local politician and anybody actually can boast to support, let's say, LGBT communities, but later on, when you actually see how it translates onto the city budget, you can clearly see whether there is a match here, whether there is any money granted to LGBT communities or to single mothers and so on, or whether the entire resources go to promote sporting events and not to what is declared by the politician in the first place. So I thought that since it is such a direct need to control the politicians and to look very closely to what they do, I thought that as a feminist, as a woman activist, I should really sit and do that and simply go into local context, local politics.
Pass the voice.
Local activism.
Okay, I think we can seek the alliances in many areas. There are lots of either collectives, initiatives, or non-profit organizations. So apart from ecological movements or LGBT activists, which are often interconnected with the feminist movement, of course. There are various human rights activists, and I would say also that it's important to cooperate with social workers. For example, I'm also a member of feminist collective, which is under the organization Transfer Station, Przestupni Stanice in Prague, which is helping homeless people and people in need in Prague. And that's also part of the broader network of the network called Místní, which is in English locals to locals. And that's a network unifying various of these either non-profit organizations of collectings, helping
społeczności, czy osoby nieuprzywilejowane, czy marginalizowane, po to, by poprawić ich warunki bytowe i uwidocznić ich problemy. Jest to jeden z obszarów, w ramach którego powinniśmy pracować jeszcze bardziej wyraźnie. Drugi naturalny sojusznik to nauczyciele, pracownicy systemu edukacji, ponieważ powinniśmy zauważyć, że historia czy programy edukacji są często przestarzałe. Historia została napisana przez zwykle tych samych uprzywilejowanych mężczyzn, więc ponieważ pracujemy w naszym projekcie historii przekazywanej ustnie w ramach projektu Gender Studies.
The voices of those people who weren't heard before, so that's also, I think, the education is
myślę, że edukacja jest bardzo ważną
can
sferą,
and we can educate the people from very early age on.
Edukować tych najmłodszych od najwcześniejszych lat.
Ja na to pytanie, gdzie szukać sojuszników, sojuszniczek, odpowiem trochę przewrotnie, bo jak wiemy, przykład płynie z góry i nie mamy reprezentacji w mass mediach, nie mamy reprezentacji wśród celebrytów i celebrytek. I mówię całkiem serio. My potrzebujemy, jakby to jest ten aspekt, w którym ten pop-feminizm miałby rację bytu taką największą. My potrzebujemy Roberta Lewandowskiego, który nie bałby się potracić kontraktów z Coca-Colą i powiedzieć, że bicie kobiet jest złe, bicie kobiet jest słabe, jakby przestańcie to robić, jesteście po prostu debilami, nie róbcie tego. Tak? Potrzebujemy celebrytek i gwiazd, które będą po prostu swoją tubą, swoją widocznością wprowadzać ten temat tylnymi drzwiami. I uważam, że jakby zgadzam się ze wszystkim, co zostało tutaj powiedziane, ale jeszcze fajnie byłoby właśnie pożyczyć tę widoczność, te zasięgi i fajnie by było, gdybyśmy miały jeszcze więcej tak odważnych, co mówię całkiem serio, jak Małgorzata Rozenek, która niedawno potraciła na pewno mnóstwo kontraktów, ale miała odwagę bardzo głośno i wyraźnie wspierać nasze kwietniowe walki. I to jest dla mnie, wiadomo, Małgorzata Rozenek, ryzykując nadal ma się świetnie. I to nie jest tak, że ona stawia wszystko na jedną kartę.
doing very well, and it's not that she's risking everything like some of us do that.
Jest taką naszą
Just an
pierwszoligową
explanation, she's just like top Gloss magazine's celebrity. So I wouldn't like to compare her courage to the courage of a mother, a single mother of a child with disabilities that protests in the Polish Sejm, lower chamber of the Polish Parliament. But still, we need to build on this courage and be glad with it, and maybe encourage more people like Małgorzata Rozenek. Well, we need more of those.
Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo.
I wanted to go back to what Małgorzata Teresewicz has said, because you mentioned local politicians, but I wanted to ask if politicians are still an ally for the feminist movement. Because according to classical, kind of outdated theories of social movement and social change, this is one of the main key areas where social movements need to make an effort to find allies within the political system. However, observation of so many waves of and so many examples of protests show that protests without any political, without any support from politicians, were actually very successful. And the question is it a challenge for the feminist movement to find a political ally, or just go beyond it and forget political alliances? Because you brought the politicians up, I wanted to ask you to answer this.
Zainspirowało mnie to do tego pytania i proszę o odpowiedź. For our discussion today,
na warsztacie pojawiło się wielokrotnie ktoś było mówione, że politycy często chcą występować na wiecach, na demonstracjach.
Take the microphone and speak during various demonstrations, and these are often politicians representing political parties that do not necessarily do a lot, or maybe they don't do anything altogether for women, but at the same time they want to show off, because for them this is a great PR building tool. And my experience is that, again, I have mentioned when talking about the gender budget, analyzing budget gender-wise, that politicians who talk the most and who want to grab the microphone as often as possible want to legitimize themselves. Maybe they don't necessarily show in their actions that they do support women. So I think that there should be a verification of it by the organizers of demonstrations, or those organizations that search for alliances. Maybe they should double check whether the politicians want to use them instrumentally. Because in my activity, as I've been dealing with local politics, I am aware of what the politicians say and do, and how much they don't care for the women's rights. They are often anti-women, or don't care at all. They often do not follow what they claim has to be done.
którzy
do what they preach,
chcą
but
się
they are the
pokazać,
first ones
ponieważ
to
w
show,
tej chwili
because now,
załóżmy występowanie
let's
w
say,
obronie konwencji stambulskiej, czy
being for
występowanie
the
w obronie
Istanbul
praw
Convention
LGBT
or
jest
being for LGBT rights is actually a tool of striking your political opponent. So the politicians come and subscribe to the protests of the groups, but is it really a manifestation of an authentic support for the groups? Well, often I don't think so. There are politicians who not necessarily
załóżmy są zamieszani w jakieś afery korupcyjne, czy załóżmy są odpowiedzialni
are responsible for some theft of privatization, or they do certain things that we do not agree to at a very fundamental level,
podstawowej uczciwości,
because
ale
what they
jednocześnie
do
właśnie
is against
tacy
some
politycy
primary
będą
ideas
pierwsi
of
wzywali mikrofon na demonstracji,
honesty.
to czy
If they are
rzeczywiście
the
to
first
jest
ones to
korzyść
take
dla
over the microphone during the
ruchu
demonstration, is
kobiecego,
it
żeby
beneficial
właśnie takie
for
osoby
the
się razem
women's movement?
z nami pokazywały i czy
Should
to
those people
rzeczywiście ma,
really be shown together with us?
czy to rzeczywiście ma jakikolwiek cel, żeby
Is there any
tego
goal to
typu
it really
osoby
for these people
zapraszały, czy
to
nawet
be
były
invited?
zapraszane na nasze spotkania, czy nawet
Should we
gdyby,
let them
żebyśmy
speak?
przyjmowali
Should we accept
dotacje od tego typu
the donations
polityków?
from those politicians at all? That's the question. A teraz chcę zapytać o opinię pozostałych panelistek, czy ruch kobiecy potrzebuje polityków jako sojuszników, niezależnie od natury tych sojuszy. Czy system polityczny jest tutaj kluczowym celem dla aktywistów feministycznych?
I think that definitely we need some feminist politicians to be seen and active. And sadly, in Czech Republic, this political environment is very hostile to any feminist attempts, I would say. So I think that we need someone like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez or even Slovak President Zuzana Čaputová at the moment. Sadly, there are not these role models or women which are doing already the change for even very short time, when they are in politics, and they are AOC, as she is called, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a very young congresswoman in the US. Of course, there is very specific context in America, but I think in order to make deeper changes in the system, we definitely need someone in politics lobbying for these issues. Definitely.
Dobry wieczór, Litka Makowska, ja reprezentuję Trójmiejską Akcję Kobiecą, czyli ruch feministyczny, który działa w Gdańsku od 12 lat. Odpowiedzi na pytanie, czy potrzebujemy polityczek i polityków jako sojuszników naszej sprawy. Absolutnie tak. My jesteśmy w Gdańsku jednak przekonani, że bez działania wspólnego, łącznie z na politycznej arenie, nie jesteśmy w stanie zmienić całego systemu. Bo my możemy oczywiście robić nasze manifestacje, w Gdańsku robimy manify, robimy najróżniejsze wydarzenia, ale nie zmienimy tego systemu, bo on jednak pozostaje dalej w rękach polityków i polityczek w takim systemie, jakim mamy, czyli demokratyczny. Ja bym powiedziała też, oprócz tego, co tu dzisiaj zostało powiedziane, ja też brałam udział w przedpołudniowej sesji i bardzo dużo mówiliśmy o politykach, polityczkach, sojusznikach, takich prawdziwych. I myślę, że tutaj możemy dać przykład międzynarodowy, więc jest to na przykład Justin Trudeau w Kanadzie. To jest męska siła polityczna, która jednak w Kanadzie wprowadza feministyczne postulaty, a u nas w Polsce rzeczywiście trudno jeszcze znaleźć takiego mężczyznę, prawdziwego sojusznika. Ale wracając do kwestii lokalnych polityczek i polityków, bo to jest też dla mnie bardzo ważne, bo działam w lokalnym samorządzie, w Radzie Dzielnicy, czyli na najniższym poziomie. W Gdańsku mamy bardzo dużo działań na rzecz solidarności, otwartości, równości, demokracji. Jest to miasto, które się może tym pochwalić. I teraz ja myślę o mieście, które przyjęło kartę anty-LGBT. Więc oczywiście w Gdańsku musimy powiedzieć i mówimy to, że miasto Gdańsk, samorząd gdański jest otwarty, bo u nas jest nie do pomyślenia. Ona by nie przeszła przez Radę Miasta Gdańska. 2 lata temu w Gdańsku Rada Miasta Gdańska przegłosowała gdański model na rzecz równego traktowania, czyli jest to symboliczny znak, że jednak ta otwartość, uważność na 6 przesłanek ustawowych, 6 przesłanek antydyskryminacyjnych ustawowych, tu u nas jest dyskutowana. Czy jest wdrażana po 2 latach modelu? To jest pytanie, co się udało zrobić z tym modelem przez 2 lata wdrożonych polityk antydyskryminacyjnych. Tutaj Małgosia mówiła o budżecie genderowym. Nawet ciągle go w sumie jeszcze nie mamy. On jest w Gdańsku, on jest ciągle dyskutowany, ale konkrety jeszcze przed nami. I myślę, że to jest nasze zadanie ogromne w Gdańsku, żebyśmy my teraz, mając tę siłę, o której dzisiaj mówiłyśmy na spotkaniu konferencji Bunt Kobiet, żeby ten bunt z 2016 roku dał nam tę moc i siłę, żebyśmy się zaczęły domagać konkretów, skuteczności, nie tylko politycznych deklaracji, nie tylko, przepraszam, modeli, strategii, ale działania. I żebyśmy jako kobiety, jak się zaczniemy tego domagać, żebyśmy nie były znowu marginalizowane, to są te krzykaczki z ruchów feministycznych, tylko to są partnerki w demokracji i po to mamy przyjęty przez Radę Miejską model, żeby go realizować. To jest odpowiedzialność nas wszystkich, że wspólnie pilnujemy, czy te rekomendacje modelu są wdrażane, czy nie. I tak samo już na koniec, jutro w Gdańsku rozpoczynają się 40. obchody porozumień sierpniowych. To dla nas w Gdańsku jest zawsze chwila wyjątkowa i inaczej świętujemy to święto niż w jakimkolwiek innym mieście w Polsce czy za granicą. I dla nas dzisiaj solidarność po 40 latach to jest solidarność z osobami represjonowanymi, z więźniarkami i więźniami politycznymi, a dzisiaj taką więźniarką jest Margot, która została zaaresztowana za błahą sprawę. I 46 osób, które 7 sierpnia przyszły w Warszawie na demonstrację i będą im wytyczone jakieś ostre zarzuty chuligańskich napadów na policjantów. I teraz te osoby, które pamiętają lata 70., pamiętają doskonale, że w Radomiu chuligańska napaść na milicjanta to był sposób na to, ażeby zdusić bunt robotników, na przykład w Radomiu. Tak też robotników w Radomiu oskarżano. Więc my jesteśmy w bardzo podobnej sytuacji teraz i mam nadzieję, że podczas tych obchodów 40-lecia Solidarności wybrzmi również ta solidarność z dzisiejszymi więźniami i więźniarkami politycznymi. A ona może wybrzmieć wtedy, kiedy wywiesimy na przykład tęczową flagę, symbol
the rainbow flag, the symbol of LGBT
class,
non-binary people. And it is my hope and it is my call. I certainly hope that when I come to the shipyard on Sunday, I will see the flag. Thank you very much.
Chciałbym zadać to same pytanie koleżance z Ukrainy. Być może mam tu pewien brak wiedzy. Jak dalej w tym procesie decyzyjnym? Jak wprowadzić w
it
życie
seems to
zmianę.
be impossible
Dla
not
mnie
to go
wydaje się
into
to
politics
często
and not to find alliances, but also not to go into
niemożliwe
politics
po prostu.
ourselves, kind of. But it's for
Natomiast
me, it's not a question of personalities
nie chodzi tutaj
in
chyba
every
o
particular government, but rather a
jakąś
question of
szczególną
policies, something that is
osobowość
sustainable and
przy
doesn't
sterach,
only
ale o
depend
kwestię
on a particular person being in
polityki
the office. I wish we all had
szczególnego
an
charakteru
AOC,
danej organizacji.
but I mean,
Oczywiście chciałbym, żebyśmy mieli kogoś takiego jak
it would be
Sandra
great if
Cortez,
there were a lot of
AOC.
people like her
Natomiast
who also would implement what they
jest cała
plan.
masa
And
ludzi,
I'm a
która
fan of a concept of
mogłaby
feminist foreign
robić
policy.
podobną pracę,
That's
jeżeli
something
chodzi na
that
przykład o
I am acquainted with, but I can imagine that there are
feministyczną
so
politykę
many things that could be feminist
zagraniczną.
in terms of policing.
Również
So
jeżeli
yes,
chodzi o
we need to go into
kwestie
politics.
związane z
Yeah.
działalnością policji. Tutaj wiele można by zrobić z feministycznego
And
punktu
we
widzenia.
have another response to that question?
Czy mamy jakieś
Pytanie o
odniesienie do
alianse?
tego pytania, czy też? Jolanta Świtkowicz from Węgorzewo, from the Węgorzewo group. I wanted to say that
Oczywiście wszyscy
of
potrzebują
course
wsparcia,
we all need
potrzebujemy
support.
sojuszników,
We need allies,
szczególnie my, już mówiłam.
especially us in small town, as I've said before, and we organize it in this way
Nawiązujemy kontakty
that
może nie z
we
politykami, ale z ludźmi znanymi.
start contacts not with politicians perhaps, but with celebrities, well-known
Natalia
people,
Buczyńska.
Magdalena Hart and Natalia Buczyńska visited us.
No, są to osoby,
These are
które mają dużo do powiedzenia. Dużo
people who have a lot to say.
przyjechało
They're very active.
z
Because of them, we
Olsztyna.
had groups from Elk, from Olsztyn.
Było takie duże dosyć
There
zainteresowanie.
was a lot of interest.
A wobec tego
So
ludzie dowiedzieli się, że my
people basically found out that we are feminists
działając na rzecz
who are also active
poznania
when it comes to
innych
promoting
ugrupowań.
getting to know other people or other organizations.
Profesor Magdalenę
We
Środę
also invited Professor Magdalena Środa
przyjechała
to
do
come.
nas na spotkanie.
She came to us to a meeting. There was a lot of interest.
Przeżywaliśmy to wszystko.
We have
Więc
really
też poszło
experienced it very deeply.
po naszym mieście, że my
So
również
the news around town was that
nie tylko protestujemy, nie
don't
tylko
just protest,
szalejemy,
that we don't just stir trouble,
jakoś
but
wspieramy to
we
życie,
can
rozwój
also
tego
support
narodu.
development
Chciałam jeszcze
of our
powiedzieć o tym,
town.
że
I would also like to mention that it's difficult to find allies in our small town of Węgorzewo because the opposition is very weak. SLD,
stare dosyć.
it's an old party, post-communist party, so
No,
doesn't
oni
have much to say.
z sympatią patrzą
Of
na
course,
nas,
they look at
ale
our movement
nie
with
będzie dla nas dobry sojusz.
quite a bit of sympathy, but it wouldn't be a good ally
Więc
for us. So
możliwości znalezienia wsparcia
there is not much possibility to find support in our
jest
town.
dosyć brutalny PiS,
We have
który
PIS party, which is quite brutal. It's in power, obviously.
przez sądy z nami walczy.
It basically fights us through
Na razie
courts.
ukrywamy.
So far, we're winning cases, but
My zawieramy sojusze
we are making alliances with groups
protestują w
which
miastach sąsiednich. Na przykład
protest in neighboring towns. For example, in the town of Giżycki,
małe dosyć miasto.
it's another small town,
I z grupą
and
w Olsztynie.
also a group in Olsztyn, a larger city.
I to jest dla nas jakiś
And for us, it is a certain idea
nawiązywać kontakty
as far as what can small cities do. Basically, establish contacts with
są
neighbors.
grupy,
Of course,
które działają, które mają
you don't have groups like that everywhere. Not every town has groups which are
protestują.
active, which protest. So that's my 2 cents worth as far as what's happening on our level. Thank you.
I'd like to add to
Chciałbym
what to this discussion.
dodać kilka słów od siebie.
My name is Jana Hradilková.
Jestem Jana Chodiokowa, pochodzę z Czech.
Co-founder of
Jestem jedną z założycielek kierunku Gender Studies w latach 90.
then peace activist and
Jestem jedną aktywistką dla pokoju w tej chwili. Jestem nauczycielem akademickim, zresztą matką. babcią i tak dalej. Chciałabym podzielić się z Wami kilkoma refleksjami na temat potencjału
activism relating to the political structures. I think that the main obstacle, as I see it in Czech Republic, is in the fact that politics starts to be a clan, a closed environment, which has its own system, and we see and this is very dangerous thing, that we can see the big gap between the civic society and political structures. And one of the tasks or one of challenges for activists and feminists as well, because this is feminism is activism, right? Is to find not only new topics to discuss, but also the new ways how to negotiate in this situation when the society really is under the atomization and fragmentation, as you said. So this I would see as a challenge to think and maybe redefine the ways how we communicate our issues. Not to come back to the same mistakes or to the same circles, but start to think about new ways how to create connections. And I think that what is the elementary condition is to think about the communication between each other also in our world, and ask ourselves whether we don't create closed bubbles, right? So this is what I would see as a challenge, and I think that the ways of the productive communication already exist. Yes, and we should focus on them. And you mentioned, or already you are talking about the ways how the Belarusian evolution, they call it evolution, not revolution, right, happens now. And I think it's very new way of movement, or it's challenging for us to ask what is new in this concrete case, right? So that's what I wanted to say, to focus more on the way, on how, not only what, but also how we communicate.
Jak się komunikujemy. Jeżeli chciałbym poprosić o więcej, o kilka słów więcej, czy to oznacza potrzebę kompromisu? Byśmy wyrwali się z tej bańki, czy powinniśmy być bardziej stonowani, aby dotrzeć do tych nietypowych słuchaczy?
Not at all. Not at all. I think on the contrary, feminist voice should focus on openness and not any compromise, but a real identity of the issue, right? So it should be self-confident, but at the same time it should be sensitive to the way the partner operates. So I think that when seeking for the way how to speak, how to collaborate, we should be aware of the structure, of the identity of that structure we talk to. So it needs a lot of not tolerance, but a lot of respect to that opposite structure. We were already talking about about the need not to, or to redefine the way how we communicate in terms of instead me against you, me together with you about a common issue. Right?
May I? So I become a little nervous. I asked myself, and I would like to ask you, what is our understanding of democracy? I think in 89, that was one of the main issues in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, and also in the former GDR. We wanted to have democracy. That means also free election. That was what we wanted. Now we have it. We have this model of democracy and we can vote. And why I become nervous? Because what I have heard here makes me a little nervous, because if we started to say, don't trust the politicians, don't trust the media, then in my country, it's my country now, but yeah, in Germany there's a real big danger on the very conservative right-wing population, and this population is growing. The voters for the AfD, for the so-called Alternative for Deutschland, is growing. Why? Because they are very clever, and they have a very good strategy. They go to the people and they talk to the people. In the little villages, the little towns, they go there. And they listen to the people, and they catch the problems the people are talking about. Quite normal people. And all these are voters. So they catch their voters. I think we could also learn from this part of from this party, this growing party. I don't like them, of course, but they are very clever. Because they really go to the people, and they are listening to the people, and they speak their language. And they are talking, and they are asking for their fears, and not only about the solution, but they are listening to the people. And I think this has to be a feminist approach, to go to the people, not only to the women, but also to men, to young people, to children. Listen, only listen, and respect what people are saying. Maybe I'm not agree, and maybe I'm not agree. It's okay. But my task is to understand why the people think as they think. These are voters. We need the allies among the voters, and we need the allies among the politicians, and we need the allies among the trade unions. We need the allies among the journalists. If we get sick of all this mistrust, then we get lost. We need to find people we can trust, and we need to find people who trust us. That's what I think. And this is about democracy.
And I would add, we need to ask about the reasons of distrust.
Yeah, and why
because because the lack of trust is the main tool to manipulate, and we see that there is a lot of manipulation in the society. So I think that social emotions is a big issue to deal with.
Yeah, but why the people vote for this very right-wing racist party? Why they vote for them and not for us?
Because people do not know what we know. We have gone through the very rich experience as activists, but not everybody can be activist, right? That's the problem. So I think that what Maria said when she was talking about the meaning of education and the need of the transformation of education is exactly that. And education doesn't matter only children and young people, but also the adult population. Because I think that we got to the situation when we face different societies, and they are disconnected, different levels of societies. People who are not active in the issues, like, let's say, there is another big issue, and this is the way how we deal with migration, let's say, right? I don't know if it's appropriate to come up with this example here, but it's another way where to expose and show the solidarity, right? The solidarity with victims of war. It's a taboo between people. In Czech Republic, it's a taboo because people got scared that they will be invaded by migrants. It's a common resource of the fear. But at the same time, you see in a parallel word of activists that there is a big movement of solidarity, helping people in Greek camps, but nobody knows about that because those people who are doing that are afraid to talk about that because they would be accused by betraying their country. So this is well, I just introduce it as a reason to think about gaps in communication about common issues in the society.
But is migration really a common issue? I think also in Germany, it's a political issue, yes. But if I go to the countryside, in little villages and little towns, their point is not migration. Maybe that is the second one, but the first one is, here are no jobs. Yeah? We don't have jobs. And now the migrants will come and they take the jobs, and then the AfD is coming and saying, you know, the migration is a problem. But the problem is an economical one. It's not the problem of migration, it's that there are no jobs. And that is it's really, I think we need to understand more about the economy and more about this kind of capitalism we live now, about the neoliberalism. It is not only on the surface, it is deeper. It is like the iceberg, you know, we have to look on what's under the ice, not only what is on the surface. Mm-hmm. So, and this migration issue is very, very much instrumental. Yeah, now it becomes a weapon. It becomes a gun, you know. Mm. But it's a danger. This is not the point. The point is the economy.
Chciałabym spróbować może połączyć to, co powiedziała Jana i Marina, kwestia właśnie komunikacji.
Regarding the issue of communication of language, which is specifically used by feminist organizations, movements, and here I mean mostly German feminist organizations, which I know, but not only them. I think that we have a huge need to use a language that can be universally understood, that can be understood by a greater number of people. In Germany, we have tremendous prevalence of language that is not really understood to a common person, full of words borrowed from English, acronyms, etc. So I understand people who react to it in an allergic way. They just reject it because they just don't understand that language. Generally, people are afraid of what they don't know. So I wanted to refer to Poland here at this point as well, that I was under tremendous impression of a publication entitled Rebellion of Women, the analysis of the so-called black protests, written by Beata Kowalska and a number of other sociologists. And it's a great analysis, which I can recommend to everybody. This should be mandatory reading, in fact, because you are able to take a great look from bird's eye view onto the situation, analyze the protests. One of the things I've remembered from the publication about language is that saying why it was possible to reach so many women in small towns and villages even. And you said because the language that was used when they were talking about violence, domestic violence, they were not talking, they were not saying, you know, the husband who hits me hurt my human rights, but my husband hit me so hard that he nearly killed me. These were the slogans that really spoke to people. And that language is understood for everyone. It's understandable, universally understandable, and to me it's a very important topic. And I think it represents a tremendous task for us. We should really work on the language. Listen, of course, on one hand, as Marina was saying, listen what people are talking about, what they care about, but also make use of our knowledge, our skills when it comes to analyzing language, and the results of this analysis should be then transferred, should be communicated in a language that is understandable, that is clear, because it's a question of our future. That's why it's so tremendously important. I wanted to refer to these causes behind social distrust towards feminists, and I'll give you an example. Well, unfortunately, I don't quite recall the title of the book that I wanted to mention. I don't remember the author either, but it was a person who traveled around the United States and talked with Trump voters and tried to, from the position of this leftist bubble, to understand these people, understand why they voted against their political interest, in fact, because when they were voting for a billionaire Trump, they were in fact voting for big corporations which would really exploit their towns and villages, which would take work away from them, and they came to a conclusion which I definitely buy. And the thing was that these people who were hard-working, honest people, work hard all their lives, they were hoping that for honest day's work and for their modesty, for staying in line, so to speak, that their labor, their hard work is going to be valued, and thanks to it, they'll be able to move on that fast track towards wealth, towards living at a proper level. So they're standing in line and queue, waiting to board that train, and they see that in front of them there's a feminist, a Muslim, an immigrant in that queue as well, some LGBT people or some transgender people, and they want to get on the train too, and they get in front of them. And then they get so angry at that this anger is spilled towards these people who basically jump the line in front of them, and not to the people who are on the second plane, who are in the background and basically distribute the seats on the train. So there is a certain negative solidarity, so to speak, aimed at
No i stąd są te
those
głosy. Ja w pewien sposób
that
szanuję te
seem
głosy i
to
ja
be
rozumiem
privileged,
frustrację
and
tych
I
ludzi.
to a degree I understand them now. I understand this frustration, and I think that most people on the left side also are aware of these reasons. So it's not about hating these people and saying that these are just stupid rednecks who were used politically, but approach them and say, you know, hey, your problem is not the blacks or the feminists, but those guys in power that you're voting for who are distributing these seats on this train in a certain way. So it's an issue of approaching these people in a certain, well, fair way and channeling that anger, their anger, into some other more positive directions. And I think we are these people that sort of got on this train in front of them, and we have to accept that we have this sort of label on us, and we have to understand that they are angry at us. They have the right to be angry, I suppose. Well, they don't, and they do. So at least it's understandable that they are.
Okay, first announcement, if somebody wants to join the panel or take a voice, grab a microphone, you're more than welcome. We have changed the composition of the panel since the start already twice, at least, so please feel free if you want to add to the discussion we just had. But if not, oh, come on. If not, then I wanted to ask another question about, because one of the main challenges of the feminist movement today is the neoconservative backlash that is happening all over the world. I mean, this is not Eastern European, Central European case. It's happening in Turkey, in Russia, in the United States, in Latin America, very much, and so on. But at the same, and this is impacts very deeply the political language and the language of politics. But at the same time, there are changes within the society that suggest something completely different. And to justify my words, I read recently two interesting surveys. One of them was about reproductive rights in Poland, where there's a very difficult for the feminist movement to find a political ally to change the so-called compromise on the abortion law. There is a little will, and none of that comes from major political parties, to even pick the subject up. But if you look what the society think, what the people think about it, actually there are more people that suggest that the law should be liberalized than all the voices, other voices combined. So people that want to restrict it further or want to keep it as it is. And the second thing is, but I'll stay with that. Because that, I want to lead with that to the issue of power struggles that the feminist movement faces. Is it the change of the political structure? Is it change of the polity and politics? Or is it a deep reconfiguration of the society? Because if you look at it, even right-wing politicians started to use gendered language. So this is a change that goes many times unnoticed, but in my opinion is irreversible. But if somebody wants to prove me wrong, there are 4 empty chairs, so please please come and pick this question up if you want. About the challenge, is it a challenge of a political nature, or the political world and the society are just drifting apart? So in order to achieve the goals, is it a question of political change or the kind of organic work with the society? Okay, we have one person. And I see second one is coming. Thank you very much.
I'm afraid that I would repeat myself, but anyway, I have a spontaneous need to respond. I think that what I see here is the challenge to make some kind of, what's the word? Recapitulation and inventarization of achievements, feminist achievements, which have been done, because I don't see the reflection of it, but you already mentioned that. You mentioned that there is a more gender-sensitive language, like of communication, even in the mainstream politics. But do we really, now the question I have, do we really feel the satisfaction here? Do we really think that it is a success, or is there some kind of new evil we face and it's still not uncovered? Or is there something wrong which we are missing? So I think that what's needed is to make some inventarization, like reflection of pluses and minuses of what we have, the way we acted, and the way we act now, the way we communicate.
Beata Kowalska, socjolożka, aktywistka,
activist, an activist, therefore, sociologist. Now, listening to this discussion, I thought that I would love to return for a moment to a book that I mentioned today, that is Hope in the Dark, by Rebecca Solnit, and tell you, listen, girls, for 30 years we've been winning constantly. Perhaps not in every point in history, but it has been a fantastic road. We've been traveling, having a lot of fun on the way that teaches us a completely different approach to politics, that has given us a number of fantastic experiences, owing to which we can feel that we're really free. And when we keep on asking what can be done better, then obviously this is the right way to go. But I believe that another step to be taken, as Marta said at the beginning of this discussion, should be a return to the question about what a feminist utopia could be like. And the question to what such a feminist utopia could be like is closely linked to the question on what a democracy was supposed to be like. And we can see that the kind of democracy we have is limiting. We keep on asking whether we should invite politicians or maybe not. But we really feel, following today's workshop sessions, that we can discover something much more important here, because the questions really concern the way we should organize an economic system and whether we can come up with something that would be an alternative. In Gdańsk and in Nowa Huta I originate from, such alternatives were offered, and usually that was very radical local workers' self-government. Now we are losing it. Talking about local governance at universities, we talk about something non-existent because the government of today has changed the Act on Education in such a way that we've lost a lot of democracy from academia. So if we want a different system, what we need to do is to dare again, as Marta said at the beginning, to think about, despite the fact that we don't have of imagination towards this goal, we need to start believing that this change is possible, and this is where we should start. But on the other hand, we should not be afraid of the democracy that is the one with a lot of tensions, a democracy of different disagreeing voices, built on everyday problems, not so much on huge narratives, more on the experience of us as women, non-binary persons. So we have perfect insight into what we need. But what it takes is daring to take another step. And two memories, I would like to share two memories that will respond in a way, because I really think that we are so close to the victory. I think that the Black protests was a success not because we found a new language. We simply learned to appreciate our own emotions, the emotions that were very often shifted back. Some were shifted aside as something too feminine. I remember the basic mistake I often bring back during Black protests. I remember that when I ran one of the strike initiatives, I thought that I would simply deliver short lectures that would now lead us to the barricades. But actually, the lectures do not lead anybody to the barricades. It is a piss-off and rage that leads you there, and this kind of helplessness that pushes you into making another step. And I remember such a lecture about successful women's strikes in the history of Poland, and it turned out that regardless of what topic the lecture was on, it turned out that those who came to listen to the lectures, and there were 300 people together, they simply burst into tears because neoliberalism killed the sense of community in us, killed the pleasure of being with one another, of being together. So I think that what we are missing now is simply regaining this pleasure that here in Gdańsk, in the shipyard, during our activity in the 80s, simply was present. So regaining those emotions that push us to acting is very important. Next to this courage of thinking about the new system, about the new utopia. When we go beyond this structure that we have now, this is precisely taking another step forward. And I want to say that we are winning. Again, another memory here. We are amidst a demonstration. There is a demonstration, freedom of courts, and we have 10,000 people in the main market square in Krakow. We have consecutive politicians taking the floor, and we as activists are also invited. And at a certain point, there is a young politician of the Liberal Party, and he says, "Welcome, free citizens." And what happens then? The majority of people in this market square says, "and female citizens." And I think this is the moment when we started winning, and this is because it is this citizenship that is something that we simply start to execute, right? We will not let it happen that they push us back to the back row again. We know that we can lead 10,000 people to the streets. And I think that what we need now is simply bring back this hope in darkness. We had so much fun so many times already, and we know that there is no return from feminism because feminism gives you freedom. And it will win when it can open up to this freedom. I always say that a feminist cannot be non-radical. She has to be radical because there is nothing to go back to. We cannot really do feminism, as Justyna says, that is likable, because we will not find a formula for this utopia in the past. We can search for certain inspirations there, but we don't want the world with patriarchy, with homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and all the other phobias. We simply want a different world. And that is why when we keep shouting, "Attention, attention, women citizens," and we know that we can take the street over, this is the moment in which we have already started winning. And let us discuss this today too, and not just focus on where we are losing and what else can be done, because we have done an enormous amount of work and we have the right to be exhausted, and we want to be radical because it is this radicalism that makes it possible for us to go back to the very source of the word radical. And radical means roots, and roots are in freedom, in solidarity, in mutual care, in equality. And that is why this radicalism is something we want to plunge into, and we simply say no to the world as it is now. And this red line, the point of no return, has been crossed. And what we experience today is just the rage of the old world that is afraid of us. That is why another step. Well, you do not win in the parliaments, you win in the streets, and the parliaments simply will come to us after we've won. Okay, so well, I came here with a different thought in my mind, but what is hard for me not to react. But I will go back to the issue of the parliament actually, because I thought to myself, and it is not about the question of whether we need to search for women allies or male allies in a traditionally understood party organized politics, and whether we need them here for the feminist movement to really meet its demands. But I'm thinking about understanding the political success of political parties or political powers that actually win using the language that is clearly anti-feminist, really spreading hatred towards minorities. What is important for me, I'm talking here about the political victory of Law and Justice, of the ruling party in Poland. What strikes me in the support for the party is that it is a party that enjoys the support of women. And it is a party that doesn't have anything that can be called gender voters gap. So there is not a clear difference between the male and female voters. In every parliamentary elections, ever since 2011, in 2015 and 2019, the support of women, the women that voted for Law and Justice, were comparable to that of men. In the first 2 years, women were in the majority of the voters. It was only in the last elections, 2019, that more men supported Law and Justice, but the difference is at the level of perhaps 2%. And if we know that this is a party that enjoys the support of about 30, 33, 38%, we might pose a question. Well, I'm really curious to know who the women are that support Law and Justice. In the first public opinion study following women's strikes and black protests, it turned out that the so-called women rebellion is clearly supported, directly supported by 25% of the women that voted for Law and Justice. So this is not a group of voters that is something that we understood. If we talk about redistribution, financial redistribution, so direct support, I'm talking here about 500 zlotys that women get for every child. If we talk about social care for children with disabilities and so on, I'm talking about those obvious things that the women get, and lowering the retirement age for women. When you look at the public support for the project of lowering the retirement age and even lowering, even for women that work in agriculture, we have those that do not want to work any longer than they need to. They have not received higher education. They don't live in the cities. They have physical professions. So we know that who opposed to this? Well, obviously, women from big cities having free professions that wish and can work as long as they're 70. So how to win? Okay, let's have an insight to our age, to our emotions. Think about our language and communication. Let's practice the change. Let's simply swap on the panels. Let's listen to different voices. It does not have to be the way we have always done it. Let's do it differently every time. Let's see what happens. Let's just practice different models of giving the floor to women so that they can have their say. But also let us think about it. Let's think about politicians who economically support women from the workers strata of society, those who do not have time for feminism. Maybe they support black marches, black protests, and even they might be for the liberalization of anti-abortion law. But what matters for them too is that they do get the 500 or 1,000 zlotys, that the family budget finally makes sense. I'm talking about emancipation effects too. They have more money, and owing to this, they simply have more time for themselves to rest even, right? So they can just grab a newspaper with a feminist column. Maybe they even read the text written by one of us. Because, you know, they might be interested in the words they read there, might think like, well, this is what I wanted to say before. I reacted to it would not be an ad vocem reaction to what we said, but when you said what we need, and you mentioned the language, it's not just the language. There are also real interests and demands and needs, and they are clearly connected with material conditions of life, and sometimes material conditions for somebody's survival.
Dlatego ja sobie na początku zadałam pytanie, czym miałaby być feministyczna, ekonomiczna utopia. Bo ciągle brzmi mi ten postulat Justyny o tych celebrytkach, z którym się tak nie do końca czuję. Rozumiem przesłanie, ale ciągle szukam inspiracji. Widzimy, że feminizm wygrywa w kilku miejscach na świecie spektakularnie. Pierwszym miejscem są ruchy miejskie. To, co się stało w Barcelonie, Ada Kalu, która tak naprawdę zwyciężyła, dlatego że upomniała się o prawo do mieszkania. My nawet tego nie ruszamy, bo my sobie nie wyobrażamy, że mieszkanie można w inny sposób mieć, nabyć, niż tylko i wyłącznie w kredycie na 30 lat. One dlatego wygrały, że zaprosiły kobiety do współudziału, ale równocześnie, żeby one mogły brać udział w polityce, zapewniły opiekę dla dzieci, dla tych, polityczek, które chciały tę politykę wejść. Więc widzimy, że potrzebujemy tych radykalnych rozwiązań, które dadzą nam czas i środki na robienie polityki. Dlatego też, ale to wymaga tej odwagi tworzenia utopii feministycznych. Ja przypomnę, jak kilkanaście miesięcy temu gościliśmy w Krakowie przedstawicielkę z Rożawy. To jest rodzaj feministycznej utopii w bardzo patriarchalnym świecie. I ta utopia jest możliwa dzięki rzeczywiście radykalnym rozwiązaniom, które pozwoliły uczestniczyć kobietom w sferze publicznej, ale równocześnie za tym stoi bardzo silny ruch kobiecy, ale równocześnie pewne rozwiązania o charakterze ekonomicznym, gdzie ruch feministyczny mówi, tak, prawo do mieszkania jest postulatem feministycznym. Prawo do podstawowego dochodu jest postulatem feministycznym. Czyli robimy coś, co Susan Sontag kiedyś mówiła, że wszyscy krytykujemy kapitalizm, ale nie wymyślamy alternatyw. A ja myślę, że te alternatywy w tej chwili się pojawiają, więc jeżeli będziemy chciały być radykalnie demokratyczne, to my musimy po prostu te kwestie adresować i pokazywać, nawet wtedy, kiedy to nie jest popularne. Czyli to jest to, co mówiła Marina, kwestie migracyjne, uchodźcze. Myślę, że akurat feminizm polski nie ma problemu z opowiadaniem się po stronie prawach wszelkich grup mniejszościowych.
All the minority groups.
Okay, actually, instead of asking another question, I wanted actually to follow up on that because what Marta has said about appreciating the social solutions that are very persuasive when it comes to politics. then and it are usually used by right-wing populists. Maybe it is time for a left-wing populism with feminism as its foundation. And the empowerment that comes with changes in the economic status is very, very underrated. We very rarely see that. And my wife, she did her PhD on migrant families, Polish migrant families in Ireland. And these are quite often people from very conservative patriarchic environments, backgrounds that moved. But because women had to take control, because they had to go to schools for parent-teacher meetings and so on, and they also were often very quick in getting a job. Even in the cases when there were two incomes in the household, this situation was so empowering that within few months, the gender roles within the family changed, and a woman took over control over key decisions, whether to stay, go back, move, and so on. When previously it was the men's domain. And in my opinion, I mean, if I can share my opinion, this is the area which is quite often underrated in the leftist populist project. Was. I mean, it's with discussions like that, it's one step further. But this is also the key, I think, one of the key factors to understand right-wing populism, because it also refers to labels. I mentioned before two surveys. One of them was about the abortion law. The second one was how feminists are perceived within Polish society. And there were two questions. One of them is, do you agree with a list of statements, which are basic feminist program, right? So equality, equal payment, so on and so on. And majority of the people said, yes, we agree with that. But then the question was, would you call yourself a feminist? Only 5% said yes. And this is, I think, also one of the challenges, how to change that, because people agree with the program, but seem to be very hesitant or very reserved towards those who actually advocate this program. And is there a way to change it?
To tutaj są dwie kwestie. Pierwsza socjalna, czy społeczna, czy ekonomiczna. My naprawdę wiemy już od Virginia Woolf albo od, nie wiem, Safony, że potrzebujemy własnego pokoju. W związku z czym ja osobiście jak zawsze przed manifami, może teraz rzadziej, dzwonili dziennikarze bądź też dziennikarki i zawsze padało to pytanie, jaki jest stosunek feministek do pornografii albo do palenia biustonoszy, albo czegoś takiego. Więc od pewnego momentu przestałam na to odpowiadać. Wydaje mi się, że kwestie społeczne i socjalne też już są takim pytaniem. My naprawdę to przerobiłyśmy. My wiemy, że bez sensownej polityki społecznej nie ma żadnej wolności, że za tak przeprowadzoną transformację zapłaciły kobiety, że wycofanie się państwa z podstawowych powinności.
The state's withdrawing from its basic obligation has affected women far more deeply than men, because they had to take over the role that was to be played by the state. So I think that this feminist ground is really, the movement is really aware of it, and we need an anti-capitalist revolution first, and then we need the feminist revolution as a part of the first one. So that's point one. Another one, 5%. Well, perhaps we should show that in feminism we can have greater fun than we would have 15 instead of 5. But I remember the studies that we conducted some time ago at my institute concerning fantastic. It might appear that it should open up everything, because we were able to prove that the equality of sexes is correlated with the quality of lives, a quality of male life as well, because it impacts positively the quality of men's lives. So they will not kill one another so often or kill themselves so often. They will not use so many illegal substances and so on and so forth. And we analyzed the results, and each of us saw something different there. Namely, my boss said, "Oh, right, no, it's not good." And I said, but well, actually we should publish information in all the newspapers that 70% of the Polish society is for equality. Well, it was about 40, so it would be a bit exaggerated, and 30% was not sure. Some of them were for equality partly, but if you interpreted it well enough, we would reach 70. It is my impression that, of course, we are tired now. We are afraid of what is going on. We are not ready for them to knock on our door. But when we look at the opinion polls from a different angle, then the support for reproductive rights is on the increase. The number of young people that Justyna has mentioned attending demonstration is on the rise too. During my classes, to my surprise, I learned that whilst before the majority of people attended religion classes, now it turned out that it is just in the secondary school, was just 3 people in the entire group of around 30 that actually attended the religious class. So we are winning, but we need to learn to talk about our success. If the right wing had such successes as we have, they wouldn't boast the way we do. So if we want to touch the utopia, we need to believe that it is lurking around the corner, and this is my demand. That's what I call for. Thank you very much.
Oh, don't leave me alone here. Oh my God.
Please stay.
First, I wanted to say that I'm completely there for anti-capitalist revolution and for a society where in the center is the quality of life and happiness and not the profit or productivity that we're all obsessed now with. And regarding the word, as a linguist, as a linguist, but no, just as a person who deals with words, I think there has been such a long history of reclaiming the words with negative connotations by different marginalized groups, queer, the N-word, or a lot of different ones, and especially in terms of women, in almost every language, there is a line of words that have become kind of negative or having negative connotations, even like the word Dame or Friseuren, or in German, or a lot of different words that notes professions or something that have now diminishing connotation, and it's not something new, and it's not a surprise that a word like feminist, which is like a epitome of a liberation, that it's not being perceived well by the society in general. Still, I would agree that the movement itself is only growing. And I already mentioned it today that now, especially with younger generations, it goes without saying, even in the most patriarchal societies, they are growing feminists. I have a feeling that maybe going into rural areas or going into groups where people would support AfD or any right-wing party in other country, I wouldn't start with saying that I'm a feminist because it wouldn't matter for them, I guess. I would start by exactly listening to them, because I feel like the other side, which I hate seeing as other side, the right wing, is feeding of the fears, and this could be a platform for us to find a new understanding, to understand each other's fears, because these are not attitudes based on hate, but they are based on fears for their own life, for their own quality of life. And this is actually, I see it as an opportunity. And it goes with every conflict, actually. It is always an opportunity. Every disagreement is an opportunity to come up with a new understanding, with a new concept, with a new policy, with a new world. And even like on the level of a language, I know that in Poland there is a discussion around the feminine suffixes, about professions. This is also an opportunity, and language is such a democratic tool. If we have this opportunity to talk about it, this is so cool. Like, let's talk about this. Just find every reason to talk with the others.
Thank you very much. I just looked at my watch, and the time slot for this discussion is over. But it, of course, doesn't mean that this discussion is over. I mean, I think it's a great starting point for future discussions. And I would like to thank everybody who participated in this discussion, or just as listening or taking place. So there was a big turnover at the podium, which is a model which I really am fond of. This time slot for today's discussion is over, but definitely the discussion is not over. And I think that despite all the criticism or hesitations, I think there was a very positive outcome of this discussion, which I'm also very happy about, because taking part in many discussions on and about and with social movements, there was always this very pessimistic feeling. Here, I felt a lot of optimism, which I'm very thankful, again, to all the participants of the discussion. And I would also like to thank the organizers, Owen from Berlin, for putting this workshop together, for inviting people, for taking care and dealing with the logistics. That is a great and also very exhaustive job, as I can imagine. But I think that was a very great meeting today. And I'm sure that it will be also inspiring to organize a number of meetings as well. I would also like to thank co-organizers, the Institute of Sociology of the Jagiellonian University, the Social Archive of the Women's Protests, and also like to thank my colleagues from the European Solidarity Center, who took care of the technical side and made the room, prepared the room in these very difficult times for organizing any public event. I also like to thank the interpreters who were here with us today for the whole day, providing their translation services so we could all participate. So as I said, this discussion slot is closing, but I'm really looking forward to next discussions and next events of that kind. And thank you very much, and I wish you all have a wonderful evening tonight. Thank you.